Welcome to our Democracy is Us session. It is Monday, September the 8th, 2025. This is the last of a series that we have been honored to share with the people that are here, all of you that are here. And then we put the last two episodes on YouTube. We had some issues with putting the last two sessions. The first one we couldn't post on YouTube. So we're glad. Welcome Matt Polsky here for a special presentation. I'll let him introduce himself more in a minute, and I will introduce him more in a minute as well. But welcome to this session. I'm Peggy O'Neill. I am the founder, together with a committee of people that founded Democracy Is Us about right at 2 years ago. And we are an organization that's based on the idea that to be the change we want to see in the world, that we want to be the change we want to see in the world. So we're strong advocates of people doing all kinds of advocacy, movement sort of work. And we're like the level before that. We're the healing level. We're the, if we want to see change in the world, we have to be that change. If we want to see change in our culture, change in our politics, change in our democracy, the change starts with us. So we welcome you to our sessions, which will resume in the normal way that we've been in having these community gatherings on September the 22nd. But again, tonight we're honored to have part 3 of our 3-part series, a special series based on bridge building, and what Matt Polsky, who is a PhD student, has the research that he's done on how bridge building organizations are doing in that domain, and what we can learn from them, and what maybe could be improved, and what works with them. However, before we begin all of that, let's take, we've got a wonderful group of people here. Let's take just a few minutes to introduce yourselves and just do it very briefly. Just love to have voices in the room. There will be several opportunities for discussion tonight. And but if you don't want to speak up, you do not have to. But for those who are willing to, if you'll just briefly state your name and where you are. So if I were doing it next, I'd be saying, I'm Peggy O'Neill. I'm in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I'll call out names. You can say pass, just to keep it going, because we do have a full agenda tonight. So Carter.
I'm Carter Hillier. I live in Pass Christian, Mississippi.
Thank you. Sharon.
I'm Sharon Herrick. I live in Van Buren, Arkansas.
Mark.
Mark Breeding. I'm 25 miles southeast of Seattle, Washington.
Okay. Beth.
I'm Beth Payne. I'm from Hackettstown, New Jersey.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Josephine.
I'm Josephine Noon. I live in Washington, in New Jersey.
Thank you. Joe. Joe Hooper.
Joe Hooper in Manhattan, New York.
Thank you. Maggie.
Maggie Schneider, basically Manhattan, New York. At the moment, I'm at Cape Cod.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. Julia.
I'm Julia Sampson. I live in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Thank you. Joe Castagliola.
Joe Castagliola, Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey.
Thank you. Debbie.
Debbie Burke, Washington, New Jersey.
Thank you. Rhoda. Okay. Ira.
Ira Feldman, Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Veronica. Okay, so we will begin, and let's see, if you would, please put your mics on mute until we're having a discussion so that our background noise stays, we don't have it. That'd be great. I appreciate that for the purposes of our recording. So now I will turn this over to Matt Polsky.
Is my mic on?
It is.
Okay. Hi, everyone, including some people I haven't seen in a long time. So this is the third of set in presentations for a course that I took with Peggy as my mentor. It was an independent study for my PhD at Prescott College. And so it's all about trying to address polarization in our country. You can look at what that means in different ways. But I will look at it, you can look at it at the emotional level, that we increasingly really don't like the people who we disagree with politically. Really don't like them to the point where we don't want our children to date them, marry them, don't want to go to the same, Thanksgiving dinners. Then at the level of policy differences, although one of the findings of this research is that we actually don't disagree with each other as much as it seems that we do. But it's, in my view, it seems to be destroying our democracy. And along with it, in an article I once co-wrote with Ira there, it's affecting our ability to actually solve problems like climate change. They're so interdependent. Okay, so why don't we start? Oh, and I'm in White Township in New Jersey, near where a couple of other people live in Washington. So why don't we start with the first slide? And I think I'll have 2 videos for you at different times. Okay. So the overall theme of the day is pretty ambitious. Can we really get on a different plane? We've kind of been building up to that. In earlier sessions, we talked about different approaches to what I call bridge building, different groups like Braver Angels and Living Room Conversations that get people together, blues and reds, you know what I mean by that, I assume, to see if we can build civility, which is successful as far as civility goes. But we also talked about, aiming for something much higher than that. And ultimately, we're aiming towards, I think, a very ambitious, perhaps, form of democracy where the people actually are co-running their government, e pluribus unum, one people co-running their government, which we're very, very far away from. So we talked about some other kinds of initiatives. The main one, we can call it deliberative democracy, and we'll be talking more about that later. That brings people together in one room, again, blues and reds, focused on a certain problem. Civility is part of it, but they go beyond that. They're trying to see whether people can reach for a higher level of citizenry to actually solve or partially solve a problem. They're given, an education on the facts of the issue, a good facilitator, and the hope is that people could reach that level. We also talked about, and I'll stay on this. This is, I think, a nifty, relatively unknown way to make a difference. To reduce polarization. It is not by any means going to be the silver bullet. I mean, a lot of other things have to go right also. And one of the things I'll get into later is nobody has really put together the different pieces, whether it's bridge building, deliberative democracy, ranked choice voting, and all the rest. But a lot of those have to go right. But if some of them start to, then this could be a really helpful thing to have in our back pocket, because it can be, I think, very helpful. But we're also going to look at the academic research on it and see what it has to say. Okay, so that's the intro. You probably looked at the first picture. So you see these 4 people in a boat. I mean, I've seen this graphic in different ways. Sometimes the ethnic, racial differences are highlighted more than others. The point is that these 2 people up front are safe as they think they are, but that's from their mindset. They're okay, but you can step back, and I think that's key, and realize they're on borrowed time. They're in trouble too, and I think that's kind of one way to look at I think the situation that we're in. It also expresses a concept I'll probably talk about later. If we can get out of our tribes and see that, maybe there's a larger tribe that we're all part of, that seems to have some potential to bring us together. And there's different ways to do that. My favorite way is just to remind people that we're all on this planet together, we're interdependent, and we sink or swim together. Let's go to the next slide, I think, which is what I'm going to try to cover today. That was the review. I'll go through some findings. I think we can have a 3-minute discussion after I go through findings. I want to try something a little different in this third presentation, give you some ideas that are kind of really out of the box. They're not necessarily mine. I picked them up from others. Game for someone who has a better way to express them than I do. But I think I wanted to make you aware of them, and I call that frames and consciousness. Then we'll move to what has the government done on some of this? And the answer surprisingly might be not nothing, not a lot, but not nothing. Then I think evaluation we should spend some time on. Another 3-minute discussion, conclusions, recommendations, really for the whole three-part series. If there's any time, and it's not that important, but I like to go through very, very quickly the references I used for these 3 talks, and then various things that didn't make it into any of the talks, just in case somebody has some idea on what I could do with them. It cover quite a bit of ground. The theme of more on conversations, because in an earlier session, I said, this is largely all about conversations, much better ways to do it than we typically do. Anything but casual. There's some ideas I picked up from different problems, like what's happening to universities, what's happening with the gender issues. There's a lot of commonality between the overall look that I'm taking and what ideas people have come up with on those particular issues. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, there's some interesting things written on the parallels between marriage counseling and what's happening in our country, and maybe whether we could learn something from that. I go into more detail on some of the sections that I've already covered, a little bit on theories, language, but I want to do that super quick. And then the time that's left, have our third and final discussion. Next slide. Okay, I may need a little help with this one. Great article in the Times a couple of months ago. Congresswoman Sarah McBridge was talking about, her role as a transgender congresswoman, and some of the, where, there's been a tremendous backlash, as you know, against the transgender. And so she's trying to learn from what she feels were some errors and how it was initially communicated. And one thing that keeps her going, because she's suffered a lot of verbal abuse, is grace. Grace has the effect of lowering the temperature, even if it's unfair, even if the burden is on us to offer it. Does anybody want to offer a good definition of grace? Because it's not really from my tradition, but I've grown to respect it. I just need to understand it better. Anyone want to go off mute and give us a good definition? No? Maybe later. Okay. Moving on then, this is something I wrote about with Ira. I expected sooner or later in all the research I did that somebody would talk about the President's Council on Sustainable Development. This was an initiative in the Clinton administration that did the impossible. It brought people together, the Ds, the Rs, business people, environmentalists, government, people from the social services world, and they found a lot of common ground. And I had gone to some of their meetings back then. I thought, this is not only nifty, they're doing the impossible, but this could be the basis of how we do policy from that point on. Well, for whatever reason, and I still haven't really discovered it, and I tried, it got dropped by the Clinton administration. And to this day, other than when I talked to my students about it and Ira, no one has heard of it. So I think that was a big wasted opportunity. And I was hoping somebody would pick up on it in the research, and no one ever did. Next slide. Similarly, also, it never came up. The United Nations has 17 Sustainable Development Goals that most of the countries of the world have agreed to try to reach to. They're ambitious, but they cover a lot of interrelated ground, environmentally, socially, and economically. For instance, end poverty, tremendous decreases in carbon emissions, and most of the countries of the world have, again, agreed to it at the UN. And theoretically, if you could, again, have those common goals, you should be able to put aside some of your differences and say, wait a minute, if we keep fighting, we're never going to reach healthy oceans or ending poverty. So no one talks about it seems, so that has not worked, although I haven't given up on it. I ran across this interesting claim that polarization is not necessarily all bad. I'm not sure what I think about that, because that's the way I've thought about it. But the argument is that you need at least a little bit of it in order to motivate people to address whatever problems they see in front of them. So you don't want zero polarization. Plus, you don't want, civility, as important as that is, to be an excuse to bury latent issues that are lurking, like issues of imbalance of power. And anyway, it's probably impossible. Somebody might want to comment on that one later. Next slide, please. Was a comment I ran across that, well, one of the obstacles to having civil discussions is that some people don't know how to do it, maybe a lot of people. So some of the bridge building efforts take some time to go over some of the basics of how to do that. Most of the literature I found literally on bridge building did not really address substantive issues that much. That was not the focus. In the deliberative democracy area, they do. And I want to show you a 2.5-minute video of what's considered to be one of the most successful deliberative democracy examples. And it took place in Ireland. Could you show that video, Peggy?
Yeah.
Citizen assemblies, but that's the same thing as deliberative democracy. It has many names. And at least in this case, it looked like the citizens were able to stretch, despite some skepticism that I noticed in the academic community. It was possible, and they changed policy. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, a couple more. There you go. All right. Some theory, although I won't go deep into it, I promise. Social psychology gives at least 3 different ways of looking at things. I think we've already talked about them, although I haven't always mentioned the theory that I was invoking. I mentioned earlier the idea of looking for a larger identity above the ones we typically think of ourselves as part of, a superordinate sense of identity. Contact hypothesis, I think, is kind of implied in some of these initiatives where you bring people together and under reasonably feasible circumstances, they like each other more, and civility is not super hard to attain. We did also talk earlier, and we will again, civility is not the end of the goals. We have to do better than that, but that's a pretty good place to start. Perspective taking, we talked about that last week. That's to me not intermediate, but a little bit more higher level than intermediate level of conversation. It's the ability to see things from others' perspectives. It's not easy sometimes, particularly on emotional issues. Another social psychologist kind of tells us, and I think we said this in different ways earlier, that if you're trying to persuade someone of something, that's usually not going to work. His mechanism of how that works is if they change, it's because they've thought it through cognitively, emotionally, and they found a way that what you said actually makes sense to them. And therefore, they might then change their mind. But they're not going to do it just because you ask them to. Next slide. Okay, let's see what's on your mind for 3 minutes.
Well, I'll just say, I have to,
You're okay.
No, you're good.
you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you can. Okay. That I think it's not only it's kind of related, but not only for people to be heard and listened to, but also empower people that your opinion or your thoughts can make a difference. And the other thing is, I think that's really important what you last said about inform and educate, or let people make their own decisions, but give them the information. But how do you get them the information, believable information?
The one I was part of about 2 years ago in New Jersey, it was state policy on forestry, and there's a lot of controversy in that. So we followed this model, and we brought in scientists from various perspectives. They didn't all agree with each other. So if you were open to it, it was quite an education. and it influenced how I thought about some of those issues. So that would be one way to do it. Try to bring in credible science, social science, and to the degree that there's differences, bring that in too.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll speak to, let me get my image up there. I'll speak to Grace. I'm not trans, but I'm gay. So I have to deal with giving people grace on occasion. And I'm going to define grace as the ability to learn and grow. And what I mean by that is none of us comes out of the womb an expert in anything. We go through life and we have to learn. And as we learn, we sometimes have some assumptions, or maybe we've gotten some, in quotes, bad advice about something. So we need to have the ability to learn the truth. And that's pretty much what it's about. So when I give somebody grace, they may say something that's really offensive to me, but I have to give them the room to learn.
Thank you. That's incredibly helpful.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have any time left on this round? Peggy?
30 seconds.
All right. Quick one, anyone?
This is Julia in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I'm having my dinner off the screen here, but I'd like to make a suggestion here. Rather than say, and you can delete the suggestion, rather than say no one is doing something or this doesn't exist, I wonder if you might say, I have no known records of this existing, or I have no knowledge of this existing, because many people have little microenvironments and they don't necessarily use the internet. But I think a lot of people are in a world where we're trying different things, unbeknownst to me, since they haven't checked in with me. But yeah, just maybe use that phrase to leave it open for things that we don't know about.
Yeah, I accept that. Okay, let's go back to the next slide. Here's where we bring in some unusual ideas. Frames. Frames are ways that we try to set the tone or the perspective of how we would like a person or a group to look at things. It kind of questions that information necessarily is totally objective and that we're all objective decision makers. And instead, it recognizes that someone could kind of incentivize or promote a certain way of looking at things. And that could be good, or it may be negative. It depends, I think, on the circumstances and your opinion. But anyway, that's just background. And there's one particular definition, a little bit more technical than me. Looking at the middle one, and I mentioned this earlier too, it's a bit contrarian. I don't think most people agree with him or me, but one way that we approach issues in a very black and white way. We talked, either or, and I talked about the importance of both and thinking, less talk. But it's harder to do that. Our brains have to work harder, and emotionally, it's asking more of us. But the fear here, and in the third bullet item there, is that this simplicity often gets in the way of recognizing the depth of the problem. It's wishful thinking that in this person's view sparks polarization. So in some way, not always, or we'll go crazy, but on certain issues, step back and think, wait a minute, this might be more complex than I realized. And for instance, this person who disagrees with me may actually have something valuable to say. And that's a higher level of conversations. Dog is barking in the background. Okay, let's move to the next one. A few more things I ran across, and Joe, who's on this call, I picked up some quotes from him that if I ever make it to the appendix, We'll see some quotes from Joe on this. But this is at an even higher level of conversational quality. It's to look at these disagreements and say, what can I learn from this person who disagrees with me? Is it possible that they have an element of the truth to add to my element of the truth? And together we might have a better understanding of the full truth or more of the truth. And there were a number of people who wrote on this. McIntosh has this whole framework that he developed. He pulled in from different schools of thought. He invented a term, I think he calls it developmental politics. And he says he wants us to strive, and I think he invented this term, I'm not sure, cultural intelligence, a cultural maturation beyond where we are now. Because he said, whether we realize it or not, there's different ways that we all see the world, way beyond what somebody's opinion is. It's what's behind the opinion. What is their reality that leads to that opinion? And he's suggesting we step back and try to figure out what is it. And he suggests there's three basic mindsets or worldviews at play. I don't fully remember that. It was a while since I saw that video, but what they all are: mainstream modernity, traditional conservative, and postmodern progressive. And he said each one has positives and negatives. And again, he says, treat this as bridges or as assets to understand the problem better and how to deal with it. And he recommends a polarity theory, in particular, integral theory, that I think some of you understand better than I do, as ways to approach this. And he's saying he's not calling for cut the pie in the middle centralism. He's looking for something more creative, something better, creating a container that can begin to reclaim a collective we. Again, this is asking a lot, and that's kind of why in the very title of this talk, I set it up this way. It's are we actually asking people to find a much higher gear, to find a higher level of themselves? And I think we are, but I also know how difficult it would be to do that. And I don't think anybody, to my knowledge, I was listening. I don't know anyone who has ever figured that one out. Next slide, please. In the realm of values, Marvin Smith talks about a transition that he feels we need from already good values to even better ones, from bipartisan, which is hard enough these days, to something higher called transpartisan, from compromise to a higher ground, from seeing leadership as just the people running our organizations and our government to, again, we the people, that we're all part of it also, from debate to dialogue. Next slide. You may have heard of this one. This called deep canvassing. This resembles superficially when somebody comes to your door on just before an election and hands you a brochure. And if you have a conversation, it's very, very brief. I've done it a few times. Who are you going to vote for? And here's some literature. Perhaps you have a short conversation. If you have the opportunity, you make your pitch. This is very different. It may sound strange, but you have a very long conversation, assuming the person is willing, about something that you may not agree with. And you get into kind of what we talked about earlier. Where are they coming from? What form their opinions, what experience. It's a very, definition, deep. It's a deep form of listening. And you're trying to find that elusive common ground. And you're not judging. And at least some of the academic research, some of it, says that these ideas could be very, very powerful. And you'll see a slide coming up on that. Next slide. Okay, this one is also a little bit out of my element. I can use some help on it. But there's some thought out there that, again, in the spirit of really striving to be our highest self, that includes our consciousness. And DePauw, for instance, and he's not the only one, says that we must evolve our consciousness, the things we kind of take for granted, to something new, a new consciousness that includes the ability to integrate multiple perspectives. And he calls this a kind of planetary intelligence involving both the brain, the cognitive part, and our emotional side. Hi, Veronica. I'd be interested later in what people think about this. I think it has potential, but I don't fully understand it enough to know. Next slide, please. Okay, this part I do know much better, having been in government a long time in the past. Believe it or not, you wouldn't know, there was some bridge building attempts a few years ago by Senate chiefs of staff. So these ideas are not totally unknown to them. There was also legislation in the last Congress that, if it would have passed, would have set up a bridge building office within one of the federal agencies. And it would see these kind of projects, these bridge building projects around the country. I think that would have been nifty. I don't know that it's going to happen in this Congress, but it's an idea for the future. There's also it's been around a few years. The Problem Solvers Caucus in Congress is along a similar spirit. These are relatively centrist congressmen that get together periodically and aim to find common ground. They were criticized in their earlier iteration that they tended to be more verbose than actually oriented towards problem solving. The Republicans on it got mad at the Democrats because the Republicans said, why aren't you supporting then Speaker McCarthy? Because none of the Democrats did. And the Republicans also thought that they were taking more risks than the Democrats were. But they got together after a year of, apart, and I believe they're trying again. So these ideas are not totally foreign from the federal government. Next slide, please. The NGA has been doing similar work also. Governor of Utah, at least at the time, Governor Cox, brought together 20 governors from 20 states, and he said, can we learn to disagree better? And they brought in the actor Matthew McConaughey, who gave a talk and said, there is a hunger among the American people for this. And as one criteria of how we're successful is that people would walk away from the other side from you and say, they're confident that you know where they're coming from. You can repeat what they said in an accurate way that say, yep, that's me. That's what I said. At least as a baseline for what a goal is. Not the be all and end all, but definitely an improvement. Next slide. Okay, let's spend a little bit more time on this one. Okay, so is all of this work doing anything? What do the academics tell us? Well, they're not all on the same page, but at least when it comes to the bridge building efforts by groups like Living Room Conversations and Braver Angels, it seems to work on the short term. Looking at deliberative democracy, which I think of as a higher level of it, or at least complementary, or striving for something more towards problem solving, there is some evidence by Fishkin, one social scientist, and others that it helps to a modest degree. You can say, well, modest is modest, but the way things are going, just look at the numbers. I don't think it's bad. There were decreases in effective polarization, which I mentioned earlier is the form of polarization that involves intensely disliking, the other side. Democrats improved their ratings of Republicans and vice versa. They found, in their view, that decisions these groups made through these deliberative democracy efforts were more accurate as opposed to just being partisan motivated. Another one, this was a larger study by the group America in One Room. They discussed 26 issues, and in 22 of them, people were able to get past one-sided argumentation beyond sound bites and headlines. So I think that's not a bad record for deliberative democracy. Next slide. Deep canvassing. This is surprising to me. But they looked at how effective it was, these long conversations at somebody's front step on transgenderism, and they found that it was successful in reducing prejudice for at least 3 months. I think that's, again, pretty nice accomplishment. An improvement from 29% to 33% in support for undocumented immigrants. There are some social scientists I keep running across who are still very skeptical on this. They don't think we really truly have it in us, frankly, to be able to do this. We just simply cannot reach that higher level. So there is disagreement. And one is particularly skeptical. Yes, it works sometimes, but only if we duck the really hard issues. But he admits, there's disagreement in the academic field. Next slide. So there's different aspects of the larger term democracy rebuilding. You can call it depolarization. Again, I'm only focused on parts of it. But there doesn't seem to be a lot that ties it all together. I mean, here or there, I would see a connection. The Mediators Foundation that Peggy brought to my attention does to some degree say, hey, it's going to take all of these things, participatory democracy, which is somewhat akin to deliberative democracy, structural reforms, which was something like ranked choice voting, civic education, they're all needed. But again, nothing that really puts it all together. Next slide. Short discussion, and then we'll have another one later.
I have two quick things that I want to mention. One is on the issue of polarization being positive. I'm going to agree with it, and I'm going to refer to people who study the Kabbalah, because on the Tree of Life, there are two separate, Chokmah and Bina. One is more of the force, and the other is what shapes things, right? So the idea is there, you have the force pushing it out, and then in Bina, it gets shaped. Think of a raw crystal that looks like a rock and it has no shine to it versus a tumbled stone, which now has been given shape and is polished. It's only when you get that conflict that you come to something that is a better product. The second thing is regarding changes of consciousness. Essentially, that's alchemy, where people are doing an internal change. And what I'm going to offer there, because it's a really complex subject, I mean, really, we could talk for days, is that people have to want to change because it is work. It is hard work. People who do alchemy have an expression in Latin, salve et coagula, which is pretty much dissolve it down and reshape it back up. And that's what it takes. And that's why it's hard.
Again, thank you for that. Helps me understand it a little better. Anyone else?
I can speak some to consciousness. There are really two kinds of consciousness. So I am going to really kind of go at a high level here. There's the consciousness that we all are, that we've all heard we're really one being. So there's that consciousness. And then in our human experience, there are levels of consciousness, which, there are different models that help explain those different levels. One that I know the best is spiral dynamics. There are other ones. Ken Wilber's work refers to several other models that are along the same lines, and basically saying, a 3-year-old has a different level of consciousness than a 20-year-old, than a 30-year-old. I mean, you could see it. They don't quite understand the world in the same way. They can't look at people from other perspectives, or they can't take other perspectives. They can't step back and see a bigger picture. And so there are levels of consciousness, how we understand the world and understand each other, that are more expansive. I'm making it a higher spiral dynamics kind of makes it hierarchy, but it's technically not a hierarchy. It's just more expansive. Like, I think an expanding circle would be much better than a spiral that's hierarchical. Yes, it does take some choice to change ourselves, and some of it just occurs naturally, though, as we're in environments and around people, are just because of the kinds of conversations and what we're exploring consciousness does expand naturally, like the 3-year-old to a 12-year-old. It's different. Well, it expands because of the conversations and the environments and the teachings and so on. Some of it does expand naturally, but a lot of people do stop at a certain level. So I've taken us over time.
Mhm.
Think
Okay.
we can end the discussion, I guess. All right.
Let's go to the next slide, and I'm gonna have conclusions and recommendations. And this is for the whole 3-part series. So I think the field bridge building hasn't progressed. There was more there than I knew going in. It's still pretty much a secret, which is unfortunate. There's the occasional newspaper article about it, or but it needs to be better known. I think what I learned about conversation, the quality of it, the levels of it, from basic politeness up to the other end, which is, what does this person I disagree with have to teach me, and hopefully vice versa. That's something I intuited, but it was nice to see it. People write about it. But those higher levels are very, very challenging. We talked last week, Peggy in particular talked about if we're having trouble finding common ground with someone else, it may be because we're having battles internally. And that's very challenging to recognize that. Again, by itself, this is not going to solve the problems that I think are getting worse. But still, there's a lot here to offer. And it also, I think, has certain side benefits in that it helps us grow as people, become better versions of ourselves. So again, there's potential if it becomes better known, it scales. Maybe if that bill in the Congress ever passed, we can see more of these kind of projects and we can get better at it. If indeed people really want to do this, I think they do. Or at least I hope they do. I know it's not for everyone. We also talked about extremists who cannot get in the right, frame or mindset to say, I don't want to sit down with that person. Why are you asking me to do this? Do you know what they voted for? Who they voted for? Maybe they're not the right person to be part of these things. What else? Let's go to the next one. So we are definitely, again, asking much, much more of people. So let me show something of a somewhat lighter nature. Returning to my boyhood, certain people, not so much people necessarily, that were known for their fights. I went back and I said, did these people ever actually learn to make peace? So I tried to do a search on the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. No, they never got there. But then I found someone who did. Could you show that second video? Hopefully this will take some of you back. And I should say, nations. All right. More should participate in these bridge building initiatives. Risk those difficult conversations, even at family events, used based upon some of these characteristics of higher quality conversations. There are exceptions. If you know someone, that is not the right person to talk with, don't even try. Or if you're at a party and your host or hostess is dead set against it, I guess you have to show respect and don't do it. But if the conditions are there, I would say, go for it. What else? The connections, again, need to be better understood, more explicit, and how each of these democracy building efforts actually help each other. And they actually might. So what's happening in this picture? Some of you might recognize, the gentleman on the left. What's his name again? Mandami. He won the Democratic primary in New York City. He's a socialist, surprised and shocked a lot of people. And they have ranked choice voting. which most of you probably know. I know Rhoda definitely knows what that is. The idea that you're not just voting for your preference, your number one preference, the way we usually vote, but you're actually also saying, well, if I can't get that person, I'll go for my second choice, or I'll go for my third choice. And all this gets tabulated on who the winner actually is. So according to some of the people I'm reading, it actually creates new incentives that they have to actually bargain with each other because they might say, well, if I'm going to come in second place, that's still helpful to me, and people are become familiar with, okay, so my choice is no longer binary, which typically goes into the lesser of two evils. So they get to show more nuance in who they actually want. So some of the things I'm reading is that actually could help with constructive deal making. And then there's the question, though, of superficiality. It may be that, okay, the second place or the third place winner, which is Lauder on the right, says, okay, I have to pretend to like you because you're probably going to win, and maybe you'll give me a job or something. But at least to me, what I see in this picture is definite affection, that he's not doing this reluctantly. He really does support this guy for mayor. So it might be that to the degree that they have any differences, he's in a much better position to negotiate a win-win. One example. Next slide, I think the last main one. Again, there are some discrepancies in the academic field about these, particularly deliberative democracy. And I think it's important to try to resolve because I mentioned this last time, deliberative democracy to some of us seems like the ideal. If we can pull this off, if we could reach that higher plane, we can actually begin to solve some of these problems. Because it's going to be hard for government to ignore citizens when they come together and say, look, we agreed on whatever, 85%, 100% of these tough issues. You have to take us seriously. They would look very, very bad if they didn't. We need to understand how to use framing and reframing better than we have. For instance, back on that picture I showed on the title page, something like helping people understand that they have an interest, a larger interest with someone they think is coming from a different identity, from a different tribe. There's actually a larger tribe that we all belong to. In that case, it's planet Earth. I think there's potential there if it's developed and used more. So again, it's not criticizing identity per se. It's saying, well, you're free to have your identity, and that's who you define yourself as, but there's also multiple identity. There's a larger identity that I'm part of with you. Some of the areas that I exposed you to, clearly some of you know them better than I do. I think we have to understand these better and how to try to scale them to the larger population. Next slide. So I'm thankful for Peggy for putting up with me and giving me this channel for 3 talks, as well as other things.
Oh, you're very welcome. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you.
Okay, next slide. I don't know what to do here because I wanted to run through my references, which are like 11 pages for this 3-part series, and another 14 pages of what didn't make it, just to expose you to it. But I doubt we're going to have time for it because I don't want it to detract from the discussion. So why don't we see how that goes?
Do you want to do a discussion now?
Yeah. Next slide. With next slide, say that.
Maybe you could just post them.
That's one idea. Yeah.
Or just go over the top 3 or something like that.
Okay. All right. Why don't we do that? Peggy, can you bring up that other file?
Yeah. Oh, honey. Oh, here it is. Good.
Why don't you go to, the first 11 pages are all references. So those are the A's and the B's. But why don't you go down about to page 12? Okay, so what didn't fit or fit too well? And I found a picture. I mentioned last time that I had spent time at Thomas Jefferson's house. We were studying this theme in a program that they had called Frenemies, where they were friends, they were severe enemies, and then towards the end of their life, they got together again. So the theme that the Thomas Jefferson Foundation put on was frenemies. So when I was in Charleston for it, I happened to see this sign. I said, okay, I'm thinking bridge builders. So you know how when you're thinking about something, you tend to see it everywhere. So here was the sign about a bridge builder in Charleston, although somebody had graffitied it. Next slide there. Let's see. Go, okay. Why don't we go to what Joe had to say since Joe is here? Go a little further down, see if we can find what Joe had to say. Oh, or go, no, before Joe, go up a little bit, then we'll get to Joe. Laughter. Oh, thanks for that idea, Debbie. No, where was that one on laughter? Just before the one on Joe. I don't know if you're too far. Oh, there it is. You found silver. So if you could do laughter right, if you're good at it, because it could backfire, Silva is an activist and a comedian, and he calls it the most effective natural tension reliever there is. And at least for the moment, when you're laughing together, you're all on the same side. And he has this interesting phrase: "If we laugh together, maybe we can last together." Okay, let's go to what Joe had to say. Joe, you're still there, right? Joe, did you stay on this?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Anything you want to say about me quoting you? Did I get it right?
Yeah, I mean, I've written so much at this point that I can't remember everything. But yeah, yeah, and you know, everything's on a spectrum when it comes down to it, and everyone comes from their own point of view. The reality inside of our heads is that while we may wonder where the center of the universe is, inside of us, we each are the center of the universe. And so we all see it from that point of view. And there's always going to be differences in what we see and what our truth are. We just need to bridge that gap to be well with each other.
I'm gonna interrupt just for a second, Matt. Sorry. So it is the hour. So I will declare this like officially over because I do like to honor the time that we promised. So if anybody needs to leave, you're free to leave. We're so grateful that you were here. Before you leave, though, I'd like to let you know that in 2 weeks, on September 22nd, Democracy is Us will resume our regularly scheduled program, so to speak, where we do our work, where we learn how to be the peace that we want to see in the world, be the form of democracy that we want to see in the world, in our country. And so we invite you to join us in 2 weeks, and hope to see you again then. But you're welcome to stay here. We'll do our best to end in about 10 minutes. Right, Matt? We'll do our best to end in about 10 minutes. But officially, we're over. For any that feel like you're ready to leave, we're just very grateful you're here. Thank you. All right, back to you, Matt.
Joe, if I could ask,
Yeah.
how does this work when you're dealing with someone who you really disagree with? Are you able to apply it?
You know, sometimes you have to get their story. If you can speak about your story and your personal experiences and get that person to do the same, you might find that what you were saying was more based on what you've heard from others, and that same person was doing the same thing, but that your personal experiences are only part of what you were each bringing to the table. And if you then start to talk about the issue where the argument is centering, you can find that you really both want the same thing. It's just that you're looking to go left and they're looking to go right, but what you're seeking is somehow still straight ahead.
Am I the only one who sees a resemblance here with marriage counseling?
Oh, yeah, why not? Anytime you're in a relationship with anybody, even if it's temporary because it's a discussion, you're in a marriage.
Okay. So we have another, I don't know, 5-7 minutes. Anyone? Reactions?
Oh, so you want, okay, so, sorry.
Well, I'll just say, if you go on the Parent Circle Friends site, they have Rami, an Israeli, and Bassam, a Palestinian, talking about the very same thing, that if you can see the other person's need, it's like your own.
Peggy, can you put up that appendix again? If we could find it, there actually is some quotes from the Parent Circle that Debbie's talking about.
Another
May
thing
not be
that
able to
really
find it.
helps in here, another thing that really helps in here is to think back to the question I say we address in most of the time, a lot of time in Democracy Is Us is, who do I want to be? So how do I have this conversation in a way that mirrors the kind of democracy that I want? And let that be the guiding force. How do I listen? How do I talk? And we do some training in Democracy Is Us too, and how to have these conversations. But that can help too, is like, oh, wait a minute, in democracy, I'd like us to figure out how to get along. And so if we let that be the guiding force in the conversation, that can help too. But I get, sorry, I didn't realize you were trying to stick with Rhoda. So where
You're definitely going in the right direction. I quote you again, Peggy.
Thanks.
Anyone else while we try to find it?
What am I looking for?
From what's the organization, Debbie? Parent Circle.
Oh,
More on, more detail on some of the things I already said. Oh, there it is.
oh, okay.
This is what Debbie's been talking about. And Debbie's active in this organization. It talks about, put down your signs, your protest signs, your social media posts, and just listen from the heart. And how do we let the other person know that they were really heard, including when we hate what they're saying and they're denying our truth? Go down slightly so we can pick up the full quote. Yeah, so this is a college student who works with Parent Circle from there. We try to enter the conversation as others, but we leave as brothers. So these kind of ideas, they don't always use the same terminology, but they're being applied. You're seeing, public health, transgender issues, universities, although I wish universities would do more of it. So it's happening. It shouldn't be such a secret. Anyone else?
Anyone else? Any questions of Matt or?
This is Julia. I'd like to suggest that I think on a federal level, I have heard talks many times that people would cross the aisle on a regular basis and have dinners with each other, do sports with each other, the families and things like that would actually interact with each other, so that a difference was not a defect, and people are not enemies, they just disagree. So I think, in a simplistic term, although there was much more, something about the entrance on the stage of the Tea Party sort of broke that up, and you can't be friends with someone with whom you disagree and things like that. But that's just my little take. So it may be a return to some values that we used to have rather than a whole new thing. like if it's new, sometimes people are a little bit weary and afraid of that, but just a return to something that used to be.
Yeah, it's a great point, Julia. And it's been noted that it used to be common, and there was some very famous frenemies who did it all the time, but we seem to have lost that, It'd be nice to get it back, but I think we have to demand it. Rhoda, you still there? Anything on your mind? Rhoda does major sessions on democracy building, among other things.
Wonderful.
Rhoda, you there?
Matt, can I just ask you the group we're going to have in 2 weeks, will that be the same topics like we've been covering here?
Debbie, I'm done unless somebody asks me back. It's not me.
So I'll be leading that as well as members of the council, Democracy Is Us Council. And we haven't decided the topic yet, but it could be along the lines of, gosh. Sorry, somebody help me. So along the lines of, I'll just go with peace. We've had this one before, and as Matt talked about, we mentioned it last week. But a lot of us were, well, like we're talking about, that we wish Republicans and Democrats, so to speak, by simplifying, by collapsing it into a simple conversation, Republicans and Democrats, if they could get along. So we can start by looking at ourselves. Am I getting along with myself? So
Very good. Very
Of us
good.
don't get along with ourselves. We're like, I need to lose 10 pounds. We're mad at ourselves all the time. We're struggling with ourselves all the time. So if we want to get along well with somebody else, then we really need to start here. It doesn't mean we can't have a conversation tomorrow with somebody, but to start here, yeah, where am I not getting along? How can I get along with myself? How can I make friends with the fact that I'm not losing this weight? So we go into more depth in that sort of conversation, so we can really see ourselves and do the transformational work, or the work Joe was referring to earlier, the alchemical work. How do I really move this around in myself so I can relate to myself differently, and as a result, relate to other people differently? So you seem to hear that. Debbie, Maggie has a question or a comment. Yes, Maggie.
Just one thought, and that is, I don't like the use of the word democracy, because I don't know how anyone defines it. And I'm always suspicious of constructions like that, where there's nothing materialistic behind it. That's why this whole thing is fascinating to me, because we're being very specific. But the definition of democracy, if you're all going to be liberal, is one way. It means that the only thing that's probably specific here is that it's the rule of power. Whoever gets the most votes wins. Now, if that's all that democracy means, that's not helpful.
So
we know what we want to win.
Right.
And
so you're spot on, Mag. You're spot on, Maggie. The definition we use of democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. So democracy is actually government of the people, but we have actually given over our power to representatives. And so that's part of the conversation that we're having. What's the democracy that we want? And democracy and politics are two different things. Politics is a way that we have gone about a democracy, but we don't have to have the politics that we have. And as Matt has brought in, that there are other forms of democracy than the one we see, that we typically practice, deliberative democracy, and there are one or two others. So we're going to be having conversations in Democracy Is Us about that. What are the distinctions? What's the difference between this form and that form? What do we want? And but in general, democracy, we tend to think of it just unconsciously, unwittingly. We say we live in a democracy as if it's a thing. Democracy is not a thing. It's an idea. It's an idea. Do we want to govern ourselves? And then what does that mean? What does that mean to govern ourselves? And so those are the kinds of questions that we ask every week, or come back in 2 weeks. That's the theme that we are in this organization is we don't have an answer, but we're actually giving ourselves the opportunity to explore these questions so that we can become empowered citizens in our country and have these conversations and make these decisions so that we can actually be a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And if
That
we're gonna
still
have
simply means who's voting and how they're going to vote, period. It's not, it's a word that's much too big for everything else that we've discussed today.
All right, Maggie. All right.
The
Thank
whole
you.
book's been written on that.
Thank
which-
you. That's right. A lot of books, a lot of conversations about
Yeah.
that. And that's what we explore. All right. Thank you, Maggie. So Matt, I'll give you the last word before I close.
I just wanted to again thank everyone, and especially Peggy, for giving me this opportunity and helping me present what I've learned and try to figure out and stumble through and hear what you had to say. It was very helpful to me. Just for your own knowledge, I'm actually taking a second course as we speak. That's actually part 2. So I'm taking some of these ideas even further, but this time more narrowly. I'm looking at all this through the field called political psychology, which is a hybrid of political science and psychology, to see what do they add to everything we've been talking about. So that's my current activities. So if anybody wants to check back with me in a little while, I might have more to say.
It's wonderful, Matt. Matt, it's been great. Thank you so much for it was his idea to present this for us, and I took him up on it. I said that's a great idea. So thank you, Matt, for all the work that you did in the program. It was really a pleasure working with you, and well, I learned a lot too. And I and then really appreciate that you offered this to our organization and our community over